What's up, y'all? I'm in Walmart again because sometimes you're living on a budget, right? So we got Renee and Miller's Never Kiss a Notorious Marquess. It's a USA Today best-selling author. There's a lot of best-selling authors apparently, especially in the romance novel world, which is confusing within its own right. So let's go straight to page 248. Starting, that's a good spot right here. Do you want me to make love to you? He asked, drawing his thumb over the erect tip, knowing he should be railing at her instead of caressing her heated skin. She didn't speak, but nodded. He lay next to her, untied the white ribbon which held the scrap of fabric closed, and parting the material, he drew it off her shoulders. The golden light from the bedside lamp highlighted her pale skin and the rosy blush that colored that swell of her breasts. His mouth trailed a path from her collarbone to her nipple. He scraped the bud with the edge of his teeth before soothing the tender skin with his tongue, then drawing it into his mouth. Caroline's lids drifted closed. Her shallow breath were quick puffs. "Look at me," he whispered. Her lashes fluttered upward. Her dark pupils were so wide they consumed the vibrant green. Knowing she watched him, he bent and placed kisses on her abdomen, the supple flesh near her belly button. Her skin quivered. Her gaze widened as he settled lower. The scent of her heated skin, of her arousal, filled his nose, more enticing than any elixir any apothecary could conjure up. His fingers stroked between her legs. She made a noise, a whimper, then dragged her arm over her eyes. "Look at me," he repeated, gliding a hand up the inside of her thigh. "No, that's too wicked. Do you wish me to stop?" She snagged her lower lip between her teeth. "Answer me, Caroline." She lowered her arms, stared at him, and gave a sideways jerk of her head. I already said that one. He smiled and delved his tongue between the sweet spot between her legs. Making a contented noise like a puss, she all but arched of the bed. He glanced up. His young wife stared at him with a clear fascination. God have mercy. She would be the death of him. He dipped his tongue again, brushed it against her nub, then suckled gently. Oh. She arched again, cupping her shapely bum. He deepened his quest. Her thighs tensed. The movement confirmed she was close to finding her pleasure, and he barely started exploring her, tasting her, showing her what a man could do to a woman with only his mouth. Standing, he stripped off his clothing. Caroline's gaze slid from his face to his raging erection. Her mouth gaped, forming a perfect O. Wicked thoughts flooded her mind. He tensed, reining in his own overheated body. They might have to do this again a bit faster than he'd hoped. But they would do it again, slower. He settled next to her. The sheer garment lay gathered above her hips, a thin band of fabrics. He was tempted to rip it from her body, yet he wanted her to wear it again, so he carefully slipped it down her legs until she lay naked. Lowering himself, he planted kisses over her heated skin with his hands, skimmed her arms, shoulders, and breasts. Caroline was no docile lover. Her hands mimicked his, feverishly exploring. Her palms skidded gently over his cock, the tentative touch that made him tremble like a green lad. He cupped his hand around hers, brought her fingers about his manhood. Her thumbs swayed against the tip, a feather-light touch that drew his buttocks tight. Holy Mother of God! His heart slammed against his chest, a heavy thump that felt close to deadly as his intensity. He was going to botch this if he didn't act fast. "Open for me, love." He slid his hands up her inner thighs and settled between them. Braced on his arms, he kissed her long and deep. He positioned his manhood at her opening, sliding it in until he felt her virginal barrier. Wishing to ease what lay ahead, he brought his mouth to hers again, distracted her with his tongue, and pressed forward with one quick thrust, knowing it would be for the best. He crooned soft words into her ear, longing to her to adjust, words meant to soothe as he held his body in check, cocooned in her warmth. Not after a moment, she arched against him. No theatrics for the sensuous wife, the ice princess indeed. He rocked against her, buried himself deep, and then slowly withdrew the tip. Her body moved with his, clinging to him. He settled deep within her, began to dance as old as mankind. He'd never wanted to talk during sex, but this wasn't sex. This was something more, something infinitely stronger, more meaningful. He wanted to tell her how it made him feel. How she looked, so beautiful, so enticing. Unable to stop himself, he whispered those words, along with sentimental words he'd never spoken before to any woman. And when she climaxed, he followed her into the dark abyss of pleasure, and nearly said the words he'd sworn during their wedding ceremony he would never reveal to his disingenuous wife. He almost told her of the truth. He loved her. Thanks, Phil Collins. I can't wait forever. Later. Subscribe.